everyone. So today we're going to be solving equations that have like terms on one side, but we're also going to include distribution in today's lesson. So let's take a look. Solving equations with distribution. So when solving multi-step equations, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to check for distribution. So we're not always going to have to distribute, but when it applies, we're going to distribute first. Then if we see like terms on the same side of the equal sign, we're going to combine those. So same side combine, and then we solve using inverse operations. So let's take a look. So for this example, we have 2 times the sum of x and 5 plus 3x equals 45. So the first thing we're going to do here is draw those train tracks. And in this case, we do have distribution that applies here. We see something right outside our parentheses, which is this 2, and we're going to distribute that to what's inside our parentheses. Remember, do not go outside of the parentheses. It's only inside. So when we distribute, we multiply. 2 times x is 2x. 2 times 5 is a positive 10. And then I'm going to bring down whatever we did not use. So that includes this 3x. And that includes this equals 45. Let me just make that look more like a 4. Okay. Notice that we got rid of our parentheses after we distribute. That's totally fine. That's the whole purpose, is to get rid of those parentheses. Okay, so we did this first step, which was to distribute. Now we're going to identify like terms as long as they are on the same side. So here we have a 45. It has nothing else. 45 doesn't have any like terms on this side of the equal sign. Over here, our like terms would be 2x and this positive 3x because they both have that x value. Okay, so we're going to combine those. 2 plus 3 gives us 5. So we're just adding those coefficients and bring down that x. Now I'm going to bring down the plus 10 and this 45. Okay, so we did step number 2. We identified like terms as long as they were on the same side of the equal sign, and we combined them. So now we're going to just use inverse operations. So let's subtract that 10 on both sides. We get 5x equals 45 minus 10 gives us 35. Now let's divide by the 5 on both sides. And those 5s are going to cancel, and we get x equals 7. So just to review the steps that we did. For some reason my equation. Okay, so just to review the steps that we did, we distributed first. Then we combined our like terms because they were on the same side. We just added those coefficients. And then we solved using inverse operations. So the opposite of addition was subtraction. That's why we subtracted. Opposite of multiplication was division. That's why we divided. And we got x equals 7. Okay, let's take a look at another example. Negative 30 equals negative 5 times the sum of n and 6 plus 4n. Let's go ahead and draw those train tracks. Okay, we're going to distribute here. We're going to multiply that negative 5 to anything inside the parentheses. That's going to be our first step. Negative 5 times n gives us negative 5n. Negative 5 times 6 gives us a negative 30. Remember, a negative times a positive is negative. Don't distribute to that 4n because it is not in the parentheses. Only distribute to what's inside the parentheses. Okay, so all we did was distribute. Now let's identify our like terms. In this case, it's negative 5n and a positive 4n. They're both on the same side of the equal sign, so we're going to combine those. Negative 5 plus 4 gives us a negative 1n. And I am going to leave that negative 1 there for now. Minus 30. I'm going to just bring down whatever we did not use. Okay, so now we just have a 2-step equation. We're going to solve using inverse operations. Let's add this 30 to both sides. Remember, we want to get that n by itself. That's going to cancel. And this also cancels. So we're left with a 0 here. But we need to keep solving because n is not by itself yet. So now I'm going to just bring down this negative 1n. n is not positive, so we want to make sure that it's positive in the end. We're going to divide by negative 1. So that's why I left that negative 1 there, so we can easily see that we're going to divide by it. Now, 0 divided by anything is just 0. So we get n equals 0. So we distributed first, then we combined our like terms, and then we just used inverse operations to solve. Let's take a look at one more example. Okay, so here we have 7y minus the sum of 3y and 8 equals negative 16. So the first thing we want to do is draw those train tracks. And we do have parentheses here, so we're going to distribute. Now pay close attention to what we are going to distribute here. We distribute what is directly touching the parentheses, what's directly outside the parentheses. So I don't want you to distribute this 7y because it's not right next to the parentheses. Remember, there is that little negative invisible 1 right there that we talked about when we were subtracting polynomials. That's what you're going to distribute. You're going to distribute this negative 1 because that is what's directly outside the parentheses. So a lot of people make the mistake and they distribute the 7 because they don't see a number here. But remember, there's an invisible 1 there. So we're going to distribute that negative 1. Negative 1 times 3y gives us negative 3y. And then negative 1 times 8 gives us negative 8. Now from here, I'm going to just bring down whatever we didn't use. And we're going to solve from there. So we distributed that negative 1. Now let's identify our like terms. In this case, it's this 7y and this negative 3y. 7 minus 3 gives us 4. So we get 4y. Bring everything else down. Now let's move that constant. Let's add it to both sides. Because remember, we do the inverse. That cancels here, so we're left with 4y equals negative 16 plus 8. Different signs subtract, so we're going to get negative 8. Keep the sign of the larger. Now let's get that y by itself by dividing the 4 on both sides. And we get those cancel. We get y equals negative 8 divided by 4 gives us negative 2. Okay, so I'd see if you can distribute first. Always do that first. Then you combine the like terms and solve using inverse operations. Remember, if there's no number outside the parentheses, there's always that invisible 1, and that's what you're going to distribute, not what's further away from the parentheses, but what's directly next to it.